My name is Greg Keelan. Chris was my brother-in-law, and more importantly, he was my friend. I spoke the following words at Chris's memorial in Wilmington, North Carolina, with his friends and family there. Unfortunately, I can't make it to Kane, but I thought his loved ones in his hometown would appreciate hearing what I said about him. I apologize in advance for the profanity, but if you knew Chris, you knew he wouldn't have it any other way. Christopher Kent Bentz was Chris to most, Chief to some, and to one special lady, he was simply Bird. Chris was so many things to so many different people. To Bob and Carolyn, he was a son. To Steve and Doug, he was a brother. And to many of us here, myself included, Chris was a best friend. Chris was funny in that way. If he was your pal, he was one of your best pals. If I can be bold enough to speak for anybody who knew and loved Chris, is to say that, well, Chris was easily the funniest and definitely the most inappropriate person that we have ever met. First time I ever really hung out with him, he commanded his dog, Cooper, to hump his leg. He reveled in how uncomfortable everybody got as that dog grinded his calf. And he kept saying how the dog loved your daddy. And he loved that dog. He loved Rex and Champ and Bert. Shit, he loved all the dogs, especially the small ones. Chris's laugh was contagious. The worse the timing, the harder he laughed, and inevitably, the harder you laughed too. God help you if you had to sit next to Chris at a wedding or a funeral because you were in trouble. Not Chris, though. He could get away with anything. He had more charisma than anybody I ever met. All you had to do was flash that bent smile, and it was impossible to stay pissed at him. For long, at least. Chief was a great friend. There was no better person to pass the time with. What would be routine moments became memories because Chris was involved. If you needed someone to have your back or to lean on when things were tough, Chris would always be there. Now sure, he'd make fun of you and say something horribly inappropriate, but that was usually what the situation needed. Now that's not to say that Chris wasn't an opinionated sumbitch. I mean, he sure loved to debate everything, from music to movies to food and especially politics. Now Chris and I didn't agree on much, but he loved the challenge of anybody's point of view. More importantly, he loved to be challenged himself. Sure, he'd try to stir you up, which he usually did. But no matter how much you disagreed, he'd hug it out with you, and all was good. Because Chris realized that just because someone doesn't see things your way, it doesn't make them less of a person. I wish more of us were like Chris in that way. Chris was a great uncle to my kids, and so many of the kids of all of his friends. Uncle Scudder could always be counted on for a wrestling match or Nerf gun war, to play Wii for hours, or force them or anyone else who was around for that matter to watch a documentary about some boxer or wrestler who boxed. I will always appreciate the love he had for my Maggie and my Danny, and the priceless memories that he gave me. Or the memories that he gave to all of us for that matter. We all have Bentz stories. And more likely than not, they involve some of the most bizarre and hilarious moments of your life. With Bentz gone, the reality that life has become a shade more boring is a tough pill to swallow. But we have to focus on that our lives are better and certainly more interesting because we have the privilege of having Chris Bentz as part of our story. So as Chris would say when he encouraged me to come have a smoke with him, despite the fact that I quit in 2003, let's be gentlemen. Let's raise our glasses in honor of our brother, our friend, and the coolest, funniest asshole that I ever met, to Chris goddamn Bentz.